Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam. Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I just need to take a deep breath because today I am just a little bit nervous. Today is Tuesday, February 13th, 2024. And yes, it is Valentine's Day Eve. Bar humbug. Shout out to all the lovers out there and whatnot. No, I'm messing. We are here in the Java Cafe this morning. Traditionally, we've called it Testimony Tuesday, and we're going to hear sort of a testimony from a wonderful queen, a Black woman. This is Black History Month. Next month is Women's History Month. And so I am excited. I am flattered that she would even consider to come. And that is no indication upon her. We talked in the sort of pregame, and she mentioned the importance of these type of platforms. But I'm really honored to get ready to introduce to some and present to others Miss Antonia Hylton. She is an NBC correspondent. She is an author of a book called Madness that really delves into a lot of what we discuss here in the Java Cafe around equity and healthcare, and also staying mentally well, and then also dealing with, when we need to, our mental illness. And she has a wonderful book out. She had to do some research. There's an impact on her personally. And so without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to some and present to others Miss Antonia Hylton, NBC correspondent, author, queen, Black woman, sister. How are you this morning?
Thank you. That was the greatest introduction. Now I'm great.
No, I'm seriously honored to have you here. And I got the impression, you know, when we talked before we went live, that you're definitely a humble sister. But I really do. I'm looking and, you know, got my notes and stuff around me. And I'm like, wow, like literally right now, my heart is going. But no, I'm honored to have you here. And I want to give you opportunity to greet the Java family. You all go in the comments and welcome her and show her some love from the Java family. But please introduce yourself, say good morning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got on this road of being a prominent, impactful Black woman voice in multiple spaces.
Thank you. And thank you to the whole Java family. I love communities like this one. And I actually grew up right outside Boston. A lot of my family lives in Boston still, or in Worcester, Mass. And so, you know, this is a community that's very close to my heart and my upbringing. And in some ways, my story, you know, and my love for journalism begins there. You know, I'm one of 7 kids in a big Black family. And I grew up with, both of my parents are lawyers, and particularly on my dad's side of the family, a long line of civil rights lawyers who had worked with Dr. King, who had done work in all kinds of cities from, you know, in Georgia all the way up to Michigan and Detroit. And so I think I just had a strong sense of justice and a desire to better understand the world, and particularly our place in it. And, you know, I grew up in a family that in many ways encouraged asking questions, reading ravenously, and just exploring the world. But I would say the one thing my family really struggled with, and that we had a hard time talking about, was mental health. And so it felt like that was the one topic always off limits at the dinner table. If someone was struggling, my parents were kind of like, okay, pray about it on Sunday kind of people, you know?
Yep.
And so it was hard as kids when we wanted to talk about our feelings or something hard going on, for us to get that full, you know, that full comfort, that full safety. And so I think by the time I was in college and I was ready to just start researching and finding my own passions and interests for myself for the first time, I ended up gravitating toward the history of psychiatry and mental health because I was looking for us in it. I was looking for Black communities in the story, and I hadn't seen it anywhere. And so I became obsessed when I found out about this story. This hospital is at the center of my book called Crownsville, which was a Jim Crow segregated hospital that didn't close until 2004. That's within our lifetimes. And so this is close history. And I think the discovery of that hospital and the way in which my family kind of motivated me to care about these issues, that's really what turned me into a journalist. So as I pursued my career at places like Vice, and then now I'm at NBC and have been here for years, it's that passion, it's that desire to find uncovered stories, or stories that just, or people who haven't gotten their flowers, who haven't had their moment in the sun yet. That's really what drives me and keeps me so passionate in this field.
It is similar. The latter part of what you were saying is definitely similar in what keeps me sort of percolating in getting those untold stories. And unsung heroes has become such a cliche, but it's really real, for lack of better words. And there is so much. We might have to have you back because we move in the space of equity. We move in the space of health equity and addressing a lot of systemic structures that you talk about and probably learned a lot about. And so I have notes here, but I'm intrigued by the fact that you research psychiatry, and it is very interesting. I'm sure you've learned the names like Theodore Stern, Greg Friccione, those like psychosomatic, authors and academics that have really tried to bring equity in their own way into this space. And so I just want to, I team will get me. So I just want to make sure that we stay focused, but there's so much to unpack just in your introduction. So we appreciate the rearing that you had in your family, and that you're in this space to tell stories, and especially around this piece with madness. And so you mentioned the hospital, Crownsville. How did that initially get on your radar? What was the pinpoint where you focused on that?
So I was a freshman in college. I'm just a teenager. And I joined this class called the Madness in Medicine. And I'm really just falling in love with it out of nowhere. I didn't even know you could study the history of psychiatry. If I'm being honest with you, I don't think I knew that was a thing at that age. So I'm learning all about the development of these hospitals and the ways that doctors discovered drugs, or the way that, war impacted people's mental health, right? But I start noticing a pattern that all of these stories are told almost exclusively from the perspective of white Europeans and white Americans. And I knew something was wrong with that because I come from a family with a history of mental trauma. One of my great grandfathers was sent to an asylum that was segregated. I had loved ones who had trouble getting access to mental health care, who had felt like they'd been shut out of the system. And so I knew we were there, that we had stories. I just couldn't find us in the textbooks. I couldn't find us in the materials. I couldn't find us in the photographs. And so I knew I had to find more. So I went looking and I read a little bit, and I came across a paper that a woman in Atlanta named Vanessa Jackson, a Black woman who's still, doing great work there as a social worker. And she mentioned the history of all these segregated hospitals, and she listed them out, and she kind of gave some background. And when I came across Crownsville, I knew I had to know more, because this is a hospital that was built in 1911 but closed in 2004. There were living people who were there, who had their loved ones there, who were patients, had such deep experience. And then there were records. The state had managed to save some records. And then the last piece was the buildings still stand. So there are these massive asylum structures that are still right in the center of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, not that far from Baltimore. You can go drive by and visit this place to this day. And it's been left untouched. No one had turned it into a haunted house. Nobody had sold it off to become a sports stadium yet. And so I realized there was this unbelievable opportunity to study this place and to put Black people into the story, to correct the record that had just excluded us so systematically. And so, at first I thought, okay, for the next few years, this is going to be my passion. I'm going to study this in college. But then it became clear to me, I think this isn't just an academic thing. this is a story the world needs to hear.
Mhm.
People need to meet the people I have met in doing oral history and in getting to know the former patients and employees of this place. And it really is this unbelievable story that for me, it's not just about Maryland and it's not even just about mental health, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. It's actually about America and the soul of our country and the way in which we decide how to treat the people who are struggling the most among us. And, the hospital, it begins in the years right after slavery, but it carries us all the way to the present. And I think when you see your history, when you understand step by step how we got here, you can look at what's happening in our cities all over the country right now. You can look at why our community still is struggling to access mental health care, and it all starts to make a lot more sense.
There's so much in your answer there, and things I want to cover here. I know that I believe you found sort of a personal connection to, in doing your research. If I could deviate for a second, because you talk about the importance of voices and you talk about missing from the textbooks, and you are a Harvard graduate. Kind of off topic a little bit, but may I ask, in the midst of what's going on at Harvard, Dr. Gay, just deviate for a second, if you will, the importance of not only history, but the importance of, I attended the event for Boston While Black the other night, Black Futures. How important is it to Black futures that voices tell stories and be in prominent positions to ensure that there's equity in spaces for people to do research, to be supported and things like that? If you don't mind, if you will, don't mind speaking to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're touching on there is a symptom of a broader issue that we're seeing around our country right now, whether that's in higher education and at places like Harvard, or it's what we're seeing happen in some public schools with people banning books. There's a real movement right now to roll back, to stop talking about our stories, to remove some of our history, and to talk less about the Black experience or the Native American experience. And I think that for us, historically, when you look at periods in American history where these same fights have happened, we have to be our own heroes. We have to tell our own stories. We have to fight to bring them back into the forefront. And so if we don't do it, the truth is there's probably no one coming up behind us who's going to do it for us as a favor. And so I see the work that I do as a journalist as being a service to all people in the public, information that I believe every American of every background can learn from will make them better understand themselves, their country. But I also do it because I know that there are people who actively don't want people who look like you and me to get the microphone, to get published, to get our materials into coursework at places like Harvard. And, I'm not going to let people tell me my stories don't matter. I'm not going to let them push me to the side. And so I think that knowing your history, engaging, reading, and trying to understand what's happening in our world right now and its connections to the past, it couldn't be more important. There's so much on the line in our country right now. And, I think that often, especially in the last few years, coming out of the pandemic and coming out of George
Yes.
Floyd, I think a lot of Black Americans feel very tired. And I'm tired. Everybody's tired. I totally understand. But I think we also have to be ready for this moment where like no one's coming to save us and save our stories. We're gonna have to lift each other up. We're gonna have to, share each other's work and support each other. And that's the lesson that I have taken from so much of what I've learned, not just as a Harvard student and someone who's witnessed what's happened there in the last few months, but also as a journalist who covers book bannings at schools. I mean, that's part of my job at NBC. Like, I see what's happening, and so we're at a crossroads, and I think we play a big role in figuring out the path forward.
Antonia, I really appreciate you speaking to that, because it just, you can't be human. You can't be on the internet for 2 seconds in the last few months and not be aware of the intentionality of attempting to quench our stories and our spirit, because that is a big part of who we are. We tell stories, we pass on legends and things like that. I want to get back to the point that I asked earlier about your personal connection. We really, as a community, we appreciate your macro sort of just because in general, this is the right thing to do. But in your research, tell us about your personal connection that you found out. And then what was it like to discover that personal connection? And then we have a couple of questions from the audience I wanted to entertain as well.
Well, there are a number of personal connections. There's actually not just one. And for me, it was overwhelming. It was beautiful. It was life
Mhm.
changing to, as a reporter, be discovering information. I mean, going into archives and finding records and photographs and details about patients at this place, and then interviewing and doing a whole oral history project with generations of families who are still living in the DMV area today, connected to this institution. But I have a number of family members who had similar experiences. You know, I mentioned that I had a great grandfather who was sent to a segregated wing of a very similar institution in Michigan, and whose life really unraveled from that point. You know, never really got the support and the recovery that he needed. And then partway through the reporting process, I think the real personal connection, the real moment this all hit home for me was that a living immediate family member of mine began to experience the exact mental health challenges that I was covering in the book. And I was writing about stories that happened in some cases more than 100 years ago in 1911, right, when this place is founded. But then hearing from my loved one that they, as a Black person, trying to talk to doctors about what they were going through, trying to find a therapist who looked like them, who cared about them, that, you know, why is this sounding like exactly what I'm reading from 1911? And it raised these questions that absolutely impacted my journey in the reporting, right? Because I think at the heart of this book is a question of how far have we really come? How much have we really changed? And how ready is this country to really give anyone, but certainly Black folks, the care that they need and that they've been asking for? And the other piece too is, you know, I grew up in that family where it was kind of pray about it on Sunday. We don't know how to talk about this. And as a kid, it made me angry. I felt like, why don't my parents or my grandparents want to talk about these
Mhm.
things, right? But when you know your history and you see how they were treated, like, for example, one of my grandmother on my mom's side, she grew up in Baltimore, very close to this hospital. You know, the stories she must have heard, the things she must have known. When you see, because in this history, there's this long story of Black Americans either being excluded from or lost to these systems, you know, and she must have known that. And so I had more compassion for her after learning my history and after doing this research, because I said, oh, I see, like, you know, she's trying to protect me from something that she knows wasn't there for her. And that's, you know, as heartbreaking as that can be, it was also very healing, because you can forgive and you can have compassion for people. And for that lack of trust that's still so prevalent in our communities, you start to see it in a whole new light. And it really changed me. And so, you know, the good part is that in interviewing all the Black doctors and nurses who I met along the way in this book, they gave me some tools that then my family used to rescue my loved one who is struggling. And we turned them around. Like, now they have a Black doctor and they have a therapist and they have all the supports that they need. But it wasn't until I met people who looked like me and who got it that I was able to get the tools and the support to turn the situation around. And so there's the pain and all of that, but there's also the beauty and the recovery and the community. You know, just in us being our own heroes and us wrapping our arms around our own communities, there's so much potential there. And that's what this story is about. It's about this hospital, and it's about, of course, the trauma and the horror that leads Black people to end up in a place like Crownsville, right? But it's also about the fact that Black nurses and doctors are able to arrive at this place and turn their hospital into a community space and start to save lives. And that doesn't mean they don't hit challenges or they don't deal with racist supervisors and all kinds of drama along the way. They certainly do, but it's really, to me, it's this love story about Black people seeing the humanity in themselves, saving themselves, loving on themselves. And that changed me as a reporter, but also it changed my family.
Um, Antonia, I know that as someone that moves in this space, you know that often though there's an assignment and bullets and you got your briefing, sometimes you respond based on the response of the guest. And so tomorrow is Valentine's Day. You're talking a lot about we had a author, a photographer that was with us yesterday. He curates this space called Black Joy. And before we leave today, I definitely want to hear about your Black Joy because this is often heavy, these spaces. And so the thing I wanted to ask you was all that you named, that you learned about the history, all that you named about Black nurses and doctors going in and changing that space. Today, there are nurses and doctors. There's Dr. Ron K. Peterson, who's at Mass General. There's Naisha Deed of Pure Spark, who holds a space and gathers. She curates all the Black and brown providers in various subsets of the psychosomatic area. There is Toy Burton that does suicide prevention. And so these movements are happening. And I wanted to ask you that with all of this going on, I asked Thaddeus yesterday, what would you say to the Black community about loving ourselves enough that when we get through the fight of finding the provider and the insurance authorizations, loving ourselves enough to keep ourselves well, and then when we need to, address our mental illness? Can you please speak to that in the context of Black History Month? Tomorrow, as you can see, I'm single. Tomorrow, tomorrow, and so I really, if you could, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, covering this story, uncovering the story of Crownsville and putting this book Madness together. I think the greatest lesson that it has taught me is that if you try to swallow your pain or you try to forget or hide something that you have been through, that it never really works. You can't digest pain, you can't digest trauma and push it away. And if you try to do that, what you'll actually do is rot yourself from the inside out, and you'll pass it on to your kids. That's one of the things I explore in the families that I cover in the book.
Mhm. Yep.
And then in my own family, and some of the essays I write about my personal journey in the book as well, is this observation that I've made time and time again, that when we try to swallow our pain, what we do is we change our DNA. And then we pass on our pain to the kids who come after us and the grandkids who come after us. And so the greatest act of love you can actually do for yourself, for your kids, for your brother, for your mom, is to go get help when you need it. If you need help, seek that doctor or that therapist. Call that sibling and say, hey, I need your help making these phone calls. I need you to have my back as I try to get into this, or I'm going to take a break from this
Mm.
work or this project that I have to do because I need to save myself. And that's not just about self-preservation, and it's not selfish. It's actually the greatest gift you can give to your family is healing. Because when you don't heal, you actually send that pain all down your family tree and down the line. And that is a psychological thing, but research from doctors is also starting to show through epigenetics that we can physically pass on trauma. And that is really, really an interesting field to keep an eye on. Evidence that painful experiences your grandmother had, stress that she had, changes her body and then changes what you are born with, because she changes your mom, who then changes you, right? And we're going to, in the coming years, find out so much more about the genetic components and the social components of all this. But both point to the reality that if we don't take care of ourselves and also show love and compassion for our family members who are struggling around us, and we do the hush hush, let's not talk about it thing, that we're going to set ourselves up for failure. And so that's my lesson when we're going into Valentine's Day, and it's all about love. There are lots of types of love beyond romantic love. And
Yes.
I think the greatest love is showing your family, being brave, taking care of yourself so that you can care for others too.
We can give the benediction. Um, I just often, because sometimes I think you may understand this. Often I wonder, I don't want the audience to ever feel that we're quote unquote beating a dead horse. But obviously, I can speak to the fact, the importance of addressing things. Thaddeus spoke to it yesterday. Um, there's value in loving and investing in ourselves to address our health. And I've had world renowned psychiatrists, providers, top to bottom. And they've alluded and they've talked to this, but you said the epigenetic, there's epigenetic data. So I've never heard that term. And so thank you for that. And just really taking a somewhat clinical, but a mixture of clinical approach and also real understanding us in our community. Again, there's so many ways that we can go, and I'm trying to stay focused. So what I'm going to do is the author and my guest from yesterday, photographer I mentioned, it does a lot of capturing of our. You write about it. He captures it in I don't know what the proper term, visible art, visible displays of photographer. He takes pictures to keep it simple. And so he wanted to ask, how did you balance the emotional weight of these stories with need for factual accuracy? And that's a good question, Thaddeus, because
Mhm.
I deal with that, not at your level, but I deal with that here because some of these stories and spaces are very emotional and you want to be accurate. How did you deal with that?
Absolutely. And it's a really good question because I think as a journalist, often you believe that in order to do my best job, I need to be really far removed from my story. I can't get too emotional about this. I can't take things personal. And it became personal for me because I had this loved one who was struggling right there in my own family. But in some ways, I think that it added a fire to my research. And it really reminded me that this book had to be more than just a history. It needed to show us the path all the way to the present and possibly beyond. And so, I can talk to you a bit about what some of these moments were like. I would go into the archives and I would discover records, writings from some of the racist people who ran the institution, who decided to segregate Black patients from white patients in the first place. And I would see some of the theories that they had about Black Americans. And reading that is really, really difficult. But I will say that because of my personal connection and because of what I know as a reporter and the work I do in the present, I was able to start drawing connections really early. So, for example, I explore in the first part of the book the fact that white politicians and doctors in the years after slavery start coming up with all these theories about what they think causes mental illness in Black people. And a couple doctors try to raise the possibility that maybe enslavement actually is causing them a lot of pain and trauma. Maybe we should not be doing that. And there are a lot of them are like, no, I don't think so. And they decide after emancipation that the thing that must be driving mental illness in Black people is that they can't handle freedom. Freedom was a mistake. They're so different from white people, they can't handle the responsibility and the rigor of day to day life. So they're writing this in medical journals and writing letters to each other, and it's informing their decision to build places like Crownsville.
You saw some of this? You saw
Oh
some of this
yeah,
stuff?
they wrote about it. They debated with each other, and you'll see it and you'll feel it in the book. And you might say that's a long time ago. That has no relation to what's going on
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
But surveys continue to show that people going through medical school now, that doctors, that they believe that Black patients are different than white patients, that they deserve less pain medication, they're less likely to believe them, they don't think that they need as much rest time and recovery. There's a lot less of that trust and belief of the Black patient. And they make different clinical decisions, medicating decisions, because they believe Black people's bodies are in some way so different than white people's. And so you can say that what happened more than a century ago has nothing to do with today.
Oh,
But the
it does.
truth is, every era is built upon the era that came before it. And so when you see the fact that some of these ideas that Black people's bodies are so different are sticking around in our medical system and are changing health outcomes today, it really brought me back to reading the way that some of these doctors who, their names are on hospitals, their names are on roads, they're the people who were running the American Psychological Association, like they developed this whole industry and the culture in our hospitals, right? Like they're the founders. And so if they believed this about us, we do need to know that because it absolutely has a connection to today. And so, yes, there's the personal pain in finding all of that, but I think it was also I saw it as an extra strength, as an extra tool I had, because I know it, I feel it. My family has been here, so we know what these systems and how much they reject us, like what that whole process and feeling is like. And so I think it added drive to my reporting, and I think it made a lot of the people who you meet in the book these families who worked at the hospital for so long, I think, frankly, it made them trust me and want to share their stories with me too, because they saw that I got it. They saw that I felt it. And they weren't going to just share some of the hardest or best moments of
Yeah.
their life, with anybody. And and so I'm really grateful for that. And so I think the next step I took as a reporter, right, is I disclose that. Like I tell you my personal story so that you know who the narrator is, who's taking you on this journey throughout the book. And I'm not going to hide from you that I have my own pain. I'm going to
Mm.
let you know that up front, so you know what you're working with, and you know who's going on this journey with you.
It is definitely a journey. And I love one of the things you said earlier as well. As we get ready to wrap up, I want to be sensitive to your time. Um, Healing is a journey. It's not a one and done. It's not a pill. It's not a shot. We could probably be healing until we get the ultimate healing of getting up out of here. I wanted to ask you on a macro level, and then we're going to end with you talking about Black joy. On a macro level, you spoke to some policy. What is it that we can do? Your correspondence is not just limited to this. I'm sure you're in other areas that inform what your answer to what I'm about to ask you. What is it that we can do as a people to address the system and make things better? And then if you could delve a little bit into as individuals, what is it that we can do to begin to address our own mental health?
Well, in a way, I actually think the individual and the community piece are linked. I don't think we can really separate them. And there are Black doctors and researchers who you're going to meet in this book who have some amazing ideas, and they've been trying to scream them from the rooftops. And I don't know that people are hearing them or giving them the platform they need. But I will tell you
Tell
that
them to hit me up. Sorry.
through them. I will. I'll give them your email. So there are a number of things that are not rocket science that they believe we could all start doing and advocating and funding now that would create so much more protection and safety and security in communities. So those are building more public parks and community spaces like libraries and really fun community centers for kids. So not the no BS, no places where kids feel over surveilled or they're going to be bothered by security guards. Communities need spaces where kids can explore, where they can make mistakes, where they can laugh, and they can find themselves. And right now, too many kids are reporting to psychiatrists and therapists that they have their school, they have their home or their apartment, and their phone, and they don't have anywhere to go. And they think that coming out of the pandemic, that's one of the biggest crises we're facing, that kids and families don't have enough space, safe spaces to go. So if you have the opportunity to push your local city council or your town council or wherever you live, whether it's urban or rural, push them to fund parks before they fund prisons and jails, push them to fund community centers, invest in those things, go to your local library, bring your kids to these spaces to show your community that we are invested and we are here and we matter. Those are things that doctors believe will start to make a big difference. The other piece is that you can do on your individual, on the individual side of things, is be that person for someone else who will listen to them if they start to struggle, who they can trust if they're having a problem. Because that's a thing they're finding, is that a lot of kids report they have no adult in their life who they can go to if they feel really down and depressed, that they're afraid to tell the people that they know in their life. So if you can become that person for a kid, your niece, nephew, your child, you could save their life. You really can. It's not a small thing to build a trusting and loving relationship with somebody who could call you at any time if they start to struggle. And, Black kids need that especially. I spoke with a famous Black psychiatrist who's working in Philadelphia, and she told me that Black kids living in Philly, on average, are experiencing 5 incidents a day of either implicit or explicit racism that is impacting their self-esteem, that they are witnessing
Hold on. I'm sorry.
violence.
Repeat that, please.
5 instances a day of either implicit or explicit racism that's affecting their self-esteem. This is kids in Philly, the population that she studies and she works with, that they are witnessing gun violence, that's affecting their self-esteem, that their belief that their lives could be long and be healthy and be valuable. And that when they go to the emergency room and they are in the middle of a mental health crisis. So say a teenager goes to the ER and says,
Yep.
I'm thinking about ending my life, right? That less than half of them, less than half, ever get a follow-up appointment or connected to ongoing care. So that means doctors are seeing them and hearing them, but then doing nothing for them after the fact.
I'm sorry, in real time. Can I ask you, because my first fear and presumption was that the suicidal ideation would automatically cause them, up here we call it Section 35, where they need a couple of days away mandatory by court order. You're sharing that it's on the other side of the pendulum, that they're not even getting the, you would just think that suicide would at least flip. I'm sorry.
No, I know, but what she has found is less than half get a therapist, get another appointment, get a call from a doctor checking in on them. They don't get any ongoing care. That's what she told me. And so, yes, there's also the other side where there's the sectioning and the coercive stuff. And in many communities, the largest local mental health care provider is your prison and jail, which is something I explore in the book. How did we get here? But, you know, when you see those systems, it's actually not that hard to figure out, well, what do we fund to make it so kids never experience these things in the first place? And in many cases, what they're pointing to is that we're building communities that aren't valuing our kids. It's not valuing their space. It's not valuing their exploration. And it's way cheaper to fund those things than to fund a lot of the other stuff we're doing. And so
even at worse in prisons, it you know, at the worst, sorry.
Well, that's as angry as that can make you. It should tell you that you could, next time you're voting, look for people who are talking about these things, support candidates, or if you're ever thinking of running for office, this is something that families and doctors and teachers want to hear from you. What are you going to do about the growing mental health care crisis? What are you going to do about all the kids who are still struggling after the pandemic and they're not adjusting to school and they're not adjusting to daily life? How are we going to help them? And you know, those solutions are real. Another piece that people have suggested is the same way we train people CPR and what to do if an active shooter comes to your school. We could train people for what do you do if someone's really struggling mentally?
Mm-hmm.
What number do you call other than 911? What number do you call to get them real help? You know, those are things that we could train, that we could create programs around. And, you know, it's not like we necessarily need a new silver bullet or a new medication. We just need more community. That's what most doctors think.
So a couple of things. I got to get ready to get you out of here. I would love to have you come back, and please, those folks that are doing this research, if you can connect us, because off camera, there's a lot of connections, and I'm on a IRB sort of community perspective review board. And so, that's in the psych area. So, all right, let me just, you done got me started. I was going to call you Dr. Hylton.
Yeah, no, we'll have to talk more.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what I heard from you was that based on the research that you're seeing, I don't know if it's largely post-pandemic, but psych, the APA and all of them are moving toward more investment in a proactive for the PD for our younger population.
I don't know if all the professional organizations are, but Black doctors and psychiatrists and therapists are screaming. They're trying to get people to listen and to fund these programs because they believe that would help so deeply, is if we really invested in opportunities, in spaces, and safety for children right now.
And I mean, us doing that as the old heads automatically bring us into those spaces as well, because focusing on the young people, yes, and they still going, as a youth worker, we would do all the work 8 hours or after school, whatever, with them a day, and then they go home, and then it's very interesting. And so hoping to keep the balance between, you know, hopefully they're going to also mention that the parents need to get some, you know, help as well. And I'm sure that they are, but I heard that I heard young people in a lot of what research is finding. And so I think that is important to make sure that they're set up and not have, we always want the next generation to do better than what we did. And so thank you for that. Oh my God, whew. Okay. So we've talked a lot, Antonia, about a lot of serious things. And I call Uncle Thaddeus in here often. I call him Uncle Thaddeus, but he curates this thing called Black Joy. We have a day declared. I'm sure you're aware of the Black Joy parade that happens out
Mhm.
on the West Coast. And like, is it next week? I was trying to go this year, but I don't think it's happening. But what do you do, ma'am, to hold your joy, your peace, and protect yourself? Because I don't get off of here, hit close, and then it just goes away. Everything we talk about, you don't
Yeah.
listen to stories. You don't live life as a Black woman in this country. Forget the author and the everything else. How do you keep, maintain, and hold and propagate your Black joy?
Well, I do a few things. I do therapy, and I talk a lot about my experience as a Black woman. And most of my siblings and my parents have Black therapists, or at least therapists of color who are supporting them. And so I spend a lot of time visiting family when I'm free. I go back home and I hang out with my mom and with my siblings. I box. That's the way, and I go to a Black owned boxing gym. So I box with Black people every weekend. I do my thing. It helps me get stress out. It helps me feel good about taking care of the physical side of my health. And so that's amazing. And, as much as I research and I think about, the tough parts of Black history, I also celebrate heroes. I'm always looking for the stories that uplift, in which we are, right at the center of the change. Because, I think too often people think that our community is a legacy of trauma, and that's one way to look at it. But I actually think our community is so is a community, a legacy of innovation, of resilience,
Come
of
here.
creation, of endless ideas, of endless musicianship. I mean, there's just like I, I could go on and on and on, but I'm so glad that I'm Black. I think that's the most fun
Yes,
possible group to be a part of.
I'm so
And
glad. Listen, you need to go ahead and register that, make buttons, t-shirts. If you don't, I will. I'm so glad that I'm Black.
yeah, and so there's the fight for the history, and I'm not going to downplay that or act like it's not hard. Sometimes there's that. There's the fight as a journalist, and the day in and day out of trying to get the stories that tell, that include us, that represent us out there. But there's also the fun and the hilarity and the jokes and the dancing and the music, and I
Um,
live in all of that. That's me.
it is and that part there is so important. And I would be remiss if I did not put in the comments as we get ready to wrap up. There, Jesus, we're gonna have to Lisa, we're gonna have to get her to but there's just so much to unpack with the history and the policy, the psych. I used to work with Ted Stern and Greg Friccione. So two of the world's top psychosomatic psychiatrists. And so you don't be in that space and not begin to pick up thing DSM-4. I'm sure they're going to have a whole ancillary post-pandemic dual diagnosis track in the next DSM that comes out. So whew, you got me this okay. So anyway,
I'll have to come back on.
listen, I'll be ready. Right there in the comments, it is hyperlinked. Go and click AntoniaHylton.com. This is where you can go and find information about the book Madness. Now, listen, correct me if I'm wrong, Antonia. They need to get the book from the website, right?
You can get it from the website. You can get it from your local bookstore. I
It's in the
always want people to
bookstores as well.
support
Okay.
local bookshops. If you're anywhere near Cambridge, I know the Harvard bookstore has a lot in stock right now. But there's also online. You can get it from Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Amazon. You can really get it anywhere books are sold.
We want to make sure that because all that those partnerships and royalties and fees and all that, we want to make sure you get most of the money. So that's why I asked if
Any
they
of those sellers, I'll get my money. Don't worry.
okay. Well, most of it. Anyway. Oh my goodness, Antonia, this was real, but very refreshing to know that there are people, as I mentioned earlier, that in media, Black voices are becoming more prominent, and everyone is not in favor of that. And so, meeting you today, and someone you met a couple of years ago at the NAACP convention. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Anthony Davis had mentioned
Oh,
early on in
hey.
the time, yeah, and he had mentioned you as well. And so that's actually they're responsible for you being here today. They're actually handling things for me now. So
Oh, amazing.
yeah, the Davis system is amazing. But I really appreciate you just coming in, and not just here, but in spaces that you were lifting along with folks like you, Janae, Lee Hill, because we have not seen the full impact of the pandemic, and these narratives that are being written. I'm sure you've heard about grievance politics. That's a new narrative that's coming up to fight our DEI work. Keep doing what you're doing, ma'am, and we send strength. You all put love, hearts, and stuff in the comments, the arms, and send strength her way. The mother's board. So I like who's familiar with church. There's a whole mother's board in the Java family where they got a whole little thread where they pray and they submit their prayer.
Oh my gosh.
Y'all add her.
I am so lucky because one of the things I got through the experience of this book is getting to know pastors and just, women and men of God who have had my back and prayed for me through the whole reporting process. So to hear that that I have even more, that's just,
You got, listen,
they've
y'all
carried
add
me
her
through.
to the prayer
So
list.
thank you.
If my mother ever finds you on social media, you're gonna get your inbox one day, baby. We just praying for you. You all right? So
And I will say thank you because I need those prayers.
absolutely. But we want to definitely ensure that we close out in Black joy as you did. And what was it? I'm glad that I'm Black.
Yeah,
That
I'm so glad that I'm Black.
you got 90 days. Trademark that. If you don't this summer, no. But thank you so much, seriously. And if there's ever a time, I mean, you got access to all type of platforms. There's ever a time that you need to come back, share something, or those folks that you mentioned will follow up after this interview. But
Okay.
the platform
Yeah.
is here. I definitely appreciate you.
Thank you.
And give Brother Matt my best. I seen him supporting as well.
Thank you so much. I love this. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Folks, this was one of the most inspiring interviews that I have ever done. I got to figure out a way how to get them off screen without, there's this little function here and you just kick them out. The thing just closes. Woo! I'll just go get the book. Tell folks they need to go back and watch this. She was so encouraging. Thank you so much for your excellent research and for writing this book. I met you at Cambridge Public Library's event, and I can't wait to read it. So y'all are definitely familiar with this sister. Auntie said prayer is serious. Listen, folks, I got to get on a important 10:15. So I'm getting off of here. Y'all not making the 90 minutes today, Ma. Michelle, thank you so much for your encouragement. Pam, good to see you in the Pam. You back. Y'all keep Pam in prayer. She's over in Chile, I believe. Doing God's work. So keep her in prayer as well. Mama Java won't ever let that alarm go. Oh my goodness. This was Sonia. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you all. Listen, tomorrow morning, we have the opportunity to speak with my brother and sister. They've been together for 36 years, married for 33. And I'm telling you, this is going to be an amazing conversation. They're going to keep it very real. I'm probably going to be on my brother's side because I know my sister and no, I'm messing. But Meet the Chasers tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And then on Thursday, Just Jimmy, we're going to catch up. I've been at a few events the last couple of weeks. I want to catch you up on that. And then on Friday at 12 noon, we have a special Java with Jimmy. I am bringing in two men into the Java Cafe, Anthony Davis Sr. and Anthony Davis Jr. I'm telling y'all now, I don't know if I need to have tissue, a beer. I know both of them. And this is going to be amazing. So come in, share this with brothers, encourage brothers to come in and watch this or the after watch, because men need to know it's okay to love on one another, father and son. And some would just say, oh, they're father and son. That's a given. No, I know of some relationships where sons have never got a hug from their father. I've heard men say that their father never told them that they loved them. They demonstrated it. So come in here Friday at 12 noon. That's it for me today, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Don't forget, next Wednesday, February 21st at 10 a.m., we will be at GBH. We're going to talk about lifting Black voices from our community. We have Richie Cadet that is going to join us, as well as some other folks who are rising Black voices in Boston and around the region. So plan to join us next Wednesday at 10 a.m. We will not have 9 a.m. Java with Jimmy. We will not be in the Java Cafe next Wednesday. And I also just wanted to ask the Mothers Board to keep Miss Teresa in your prayers. Today is the anniversary of her losing her mom some years ago. And so please keep Miss T in your prayers. Shoot her a message, check in on her. Let her know how much we love and appreciate her just for who she is. She's a staple here in the Java Cafe. And so to everyone, Lasagna, I know I'm a bad brother. I'm going to do better. I'll tell you privately. I was just hustling. Keep it that. Look who's in the room. Her last name ain't Hills no more, but my big sister. Well, she ain't my big sister. My oldest biological sister is in the room. Hi, Cammie. Cammie's in the room, y'all. Hi, Cam. I know why you here today. Y'all didn't have to go to work. Did the snow? Hold on. We still ain't got no snow. That don't mean it's not coming. I seen some posts. She said, you're not a bad brother. And my baby sister. Okay, somebody hit Nikki. Tell Nikki to. Oh, I got my mother. Is Ma in here? I think I saw Ma this morning. Yes, there's Ma. Hi, Mama Java. I got my sisters in the room this morning. Lasagna, where you're in Brockton, right? So it's coming. It is coming. Sharon is praying for Miss Teresa. Don't do me, Tashad. It's coming. So y'all remember the last time they said it was coming and it didn't come and then it came. So I'm telling y'all, for the past couple of years, we've been getting psyched out and all this. I think this is the most the city has responded, cancel school early and whatnot. And it's a hard decision. I've been on the 5th floor when Mayor Menino had the and the superintendent, Carol, and I think who was the other one? Before Carol. They had to make decisions based on the information. We can't control the weather. You get a good El Nino wind that come through and shift everything. But trust and believe, I don't think it's over yet. All right, I'm getting off here. I got to get on this 10:15. There's Ma. They've been messing up. Tashad, it was good to see you the other night. You looked wonderful. As always. Newton didn't care. You just never know. All right, I'm getting off of here. We will see you guys tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with the Chases, and then on Thursday back with me, and on Friday with the Davis. I was going to say the Davis brothers. Well, they are brothers, but not brothers. The Davis men will be with us on Friday at 12 noon. Okay. Kisses. I know what besos mean. I'm going to leave that alone. Y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Before moving back to Boston in 2016, I prayed, Lord, please. What? No more. Pastor Marion. 2015, January of 2015 is when y'all got those 100 inches. I was living in Brooklyn then, so I wasn't here. And the mayor at that time, Marty Walsh, we were on the phone. He called to check in, see how things were going in New York. He was like, James, I don't understand. All I did was clear the streets. The Patriots won that year. And y'all had snow every weekend from like the middle of January to like the middle of February. And they must have cleared the snow for the parade. And y'all were pissed. And Marty was like, anyway, let me get off of here. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Before I say, let me get off of here 5 more times again. Peace, everybody.